as you know, we ask every single guest, what is the most impactful moment in your life that changed everything for the future?
Yeah, it happened at an early age, and I really didn't understand how impactful it was going to be at the time. A little backstory to lead to it is I was born and abandoned at birth from my biological father. I never met the man, don't know anything about the guy. So my mom and I came up single, trying to figure it out. She met a guy who later adopted me. That moment changed the trajectory of my life.
Welcome to the Impact Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Morris, and I am excited. Man, this is a one that's been in the coming, a long time coming. We've got Mark Vincent Fansler in the house, and we're going to have a great conversation. So please help me welcome Mark to the Impact Effect Podcast.
Jim, man, appreciate you having me in. I'm really looking forward to being part of this.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a good conversation. And as you know, we ask every single guest, what is the most impactful moment in your life that changed everything for the future?
Yeah, it happened at an early age, and I really didn't understand how impactful it was going to be at the time. A little backstory to lead to it is I was born and abandoned at birth from my biological father. I never met the man, don't know anything about the guy. So my mom and I came up single, trying to figure it out. She met a guy who later adopted me. That moment changed the trajectory of my life. I didn't realize just how much at the moment, but he was, I say was because I lost him about 3 months ago. Just an incredible guy. Some of the challenges I had during that time was feeling abandoned from what happened to me at birth. His family, great people, but they made it a pretty common practice to let me know that I wasn't blood. I didn't belong, right? He, on the other hand, acted like that was not the case and treated me just like I was his own, so much so that it was like I was more of a pet project to him to make sure I didn't turn out bad. And it was pretty extreme at times. You know, my mom would get on him, tell him, ease up on me, and he'd say, "Leave me alone, woman. I know what I'm doing. I'm trying to make something of the boy." And at that moment, I was, young child. Hearing that, it sounded like he thought I was nothing then. And of course, that wasn't the case. But these things start to stack up on me over life. And through my life, I watched him. He had a brain tumor when he was 18, lost everything, had to learn how to walk and talk and everything. It affected him his whole life. But the one thing he never did, he never complained, never used it as a crutch, never let it stop him. And I just saw that as a model that I needed to be, right? And between that and the things that I had come through and deciding that I was more than they were believing I was, it created a tenacity inside of me that just carried me. And if it wasn't for that man, I wouldn't have it.
Wow. What a wild scenario. Because at first you were feeling abandoned. You felt that you had this new man in your life that would guide you and help you, and he was. But then there was those other things that came about, that came into the picture. At what age did you start to feel kind of that you weren't accepted by the other side of the family?
That was immediate. So I was 5, 6 years old, dealing with all that stuff. And, at that age, you don't have critical thinking in you yet. So you hear what you hear, and I'm a kinesthetic cat. I feel stuff, right? So when that stuff hit, it sticks with you, and it sticks for a while. I had self-esteem issues. I still struggle with a little bit today, despite all I've accomplished. Feel like I don't deserve to be in some of the rooms that I find myself in. I was recently accepted into the boardroom. That's one of the masterminds in the country. The top 1%ers are there. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And they think I belong there. so I'm going to take it and run with it, you know. So all that stuff, you know, just piles up on you in your life. And if I didn't have Pop as my role model, had it been anybody else, I don't think I'd have turned out the way that I did. You know, and that, some will look at that and say it's a good thing, others might not. But, you know, I just don't have an ounce of quit in me. You know, I have a tenacity that carries me through just about everything. I've not had anything stop me. You know, it might have knocked me off kilter a few times, but it was only long enough to get my balance and move again. You know, I started as a carpenter back in '83. Went through all the positions in a corporate life because I came out of my family without business people around me, without advanced degrees around me, or even any degrees around me, because the whole family, nobody went to college, you know, for my father back. And didn't have anybody that was in business around me, entrepreneurs or any of that stuff to sort of look to for mentorship. So I went at it all the hard way. I just said, I want to learn that, and I would jump in it, do it all wrong, every conceivable way. And then over time, I would start to figure it out. And everything was not the end for me. It was just like, I needed to know what was next always. And when I got to about 17, 18 years old, I had a vision hit me, and I just don't have those. So it stuck with me. It's like, where did this come from?
What's something that you remember along the way that was a major choice you had to make to maybe get around the right people, or how'd you get into more business-minded, entrepreneurial, you know, groups or things like that? Because, you know, I think anybody who's accomplished what you've accomplished, anybody who's taken a lot of risks, you know, strive to hit new goals and new marks, I feel like everybody I've talked to can remember one program or one chance they took or investment in themselves to kind of get to the next level, to kind of switch and start to put yourself in different areas and in different rooms and ways. Does anything come to mind?
There wasn't anything that I did. Nothing that made a huge shift all of a sudden. It was just a long, arduous chain of events that, you know, I had the vision, and I was like, I'm wildly unprepared for the vision. The vision was, as I got out of a very expensive car on a job that always belonged to someone else. The crews were always working for somebody else. The job was always somebody else's. And the property that the job was on was always somebody else's. In the vision, it was all mine. And I didn't know how I was going to get there. I just knew that I was. So everything that I did from that moment on, every decision I made was, will this get me closer to that vision or farther away from it?
I love that perspective, man. I love it. Let's go.
So I took the path that I wasn't going to go to school, university. One, I wasn't very good at it, you know, growing up. I didn't have the attention span for it. I could take on a lot of information very quickly, and if the rest of the world wasn't moving as quickly as I was, I would lose interest, and then I would start missing stuff, right? So over time, I did that, and what ended up happening was I decided, in order to get what I wanted to get, I needed an education. I just didn't care about a degree. Because, let's face it, half of a degree is fluff courses to fill out the hours that you need. And if I didn't need it to do what I was wanting to do with my life, I wasn't going to spend my time taking the course. So I'm very educated. I'm probably one of the most educated non-college graduates you'll find. But that's because I care more about the education as a whole. You know, everything had to serve a purpose. You know, I've taken college courses and all that sort of stuff. But over time, I got to a point where people stopped asking me things. Like when I was coming up in my corporate life, I went from a carpenter to a senior vice president for companies that were doing $300-400 million a year on the operational side. And then I did it on the business development, marketing, branding, pre-con side, because it was all in commercial mixed-use construction at the time. And then I left construction and went into real estate. And each time I made these changes, I had to take a massive pay cut because I was stepping into a field I wasn't proven in yet, right? And when I get there, when I made the first move into the business development side of the business, 18 months later, I was a senior vice president again. When I moved into real estate, a year later, I was a senior vice president again. So I've seen this business from the ground up. There's no part of it I haven't found success in. So that's done a lot for me, and that education has helped a lot. But what happened is the similarities between my personal life, between feeling abandoned and being abandoned, and having my pop's family tell me I wasn't blood, and everything else on the professional side, I was hearing similar things with regard to my pedigree. Where did you come from? Where did you go to school? Because I was challenging people right and left because I knew fundamentally what they wanted to do, what they were showing on the plans wasn't going to work. And first question they would ask is, where'd you get your degree? That was to shut me up. I said, I don't have one. It doesn't matter. I'm right, you're wrong. You're going to find this out in a few months.
And in real estate, when you're building or you're transacting, no one wants to get to the end and realize that there's a massive mistake. Right. Profitability is not what it, is anticipated for the investors, right? You go through the whole segmentation of any of those processes and realize the level of risk, the opportunity that may be decreased based on one decision, one placement, permitting, all of it, right? Yeah. It's a complex scenario when it comes to development and real estate and transactions.
Specifically to commercial mixed use, because they're not small jobs, right? These are huge. My last corporate job was 2.7 million square feet on one site.
2.7 million square feet.
Killer job. Loved it. It let me put everything I did do. Everything I had learned in my career, that allowed me to put it all to use.
When you started transitioning to different segments from development to real estate to all those things, and you started at the bottom or a lower level, took the pay cut, what were you thinking? Was this a long game? Was this because you knew you needed to acquire the education through the process?
Yeah, I learned best by doing. So that's
kinesthetic.
That's it. So for me, it was always, whatever I was doing was always just in the way of what I needed to do next. And when I accomplished something, I accomplished it to an expert level before I moved on to what was next. So each time I made these moves, it's because I was around very qualified, high caliber players, and I had learned everything that I could learn, right? So when I made these moves, it was always, what else do I need to accomplish that vision I had at 17, 18 years old? The next thing, at that point when I left construction into real estate is I knew how to operationally run a job. I know how to create the relationships, create the budgets, negotiate them, sign the contracts, and we already knew that I could build them. The next thing was how do they put the jobs together, right? So I stepped away from everything that I had learned, everything that I knew, everything that I was incredibly good at the time, to step into a world I knew nothing.
But it was part of that vision. It was part of you navigating the dream, knowing that it's going to take time. It's going to take new skill set. It's going to take putting yourself in a situation where you're not at the top. You may be feeling uncomfortable, inferior to different knowledge bases or people with longer track records. But in order for you to get to your dream, to get to your vision, that was the steps and process that you knew you had to take.
That was the only ones I knew how to take. And there was probably plenty of other ones that I could have taken. But coming from where I come from, I grew up on a chicken farm. Christ, we had, 8,000, 10,000 chickens, and we were collecting eggs 3 times a day by hand. I literally had my hands and feet in chicken crap every day, right? It could be the reason I'm so tall, but at the end of the day, I'm shocked that we're not all massively ill from ailments, because none of us were wearing masks and all that mess. It was a brutal time. But, that was another thing. I hated it. So it's a pretty driving force to want something better, right? So that was just what I knew how to do. It was just to physically go into the next thing, immerse myself in it, not knowing anything, making all the mistakes and learning from every mistake as I went.
It's interesting because as you're saying this, I'm thinking about starting at rock bottom, starting at a place where emotionally you're struggling, right? You're feeling abandoned in the chicken farm, picking up the eggs and shit, all that, right? Doing something you hated, and you started at the bottom and you continued to navigate to different stages and different elements. And, I think for anybody listening, the audience, how many times have you been at your rock bottom where you thought there wasn't another option, where you thought this is the worst it can get, and how am I going to claw myself out of this?
Every time I made one of those moves, I felt like that shortly after I made those moves, because I'm stepping into something I had no idea. When you step out of a world where you're at the top of the food chain, everything you do sort of turns to gold because you've gotten that good at what you do.
Yeah.
And then you step into a world that you don't. You're accustomed to being successful. And to go from that to immediately being not successful at everything you try for a while, that's a pretty humbling experience. But it was necessary.
I was just going to ask you, like, it must have been very humbling. And there's no room for ego in those moments. You're putting yourself in a position and in a room or in a company or in an industry where you are forced to learn. You're not the guy at the top of the totem pole. And, several people have mentioned that in some of the episodes of the podcast. It's like you get in the room where you're the smartest. Why the hell am I in this room? What am I actually gaining if I want to get to the next tier, to the next opportunity, to the next stage of my life or my career, right? Because I think it does go hand in hand. The knowledge you learn in any industry and then go back and learn something new, and how you build yourself and how you stumble and get back up, and how you have to make a new set of relationships and build deeper human connection and leverage certain resources and use different jargon and have different conversations. It can feel heavy. There is a pressure there. How did you feel in those moments? Did you ever struggle with it? Did you ever want to give up? Did you ever have some dark moments where you were just like, man, how the hell am I going to get through this?
Yeah, of course. And I don't do anything small. So when I throw myself in the middle of stuff, you either win big or lose big, right? So yeah, there's plenty moments where I was questioning my sanity. Like, why are you doing this? I could step back a few steps from where I am, and life would be a lot easier. But, that's just kind of like, if I took on that mentality throughout my life, I would probably still be a carpenter. And I know guys that were carpenters when I started who are still carpenters.
Yeah, makes sense.
So if you don't get real comfortable putting yourself in uncomfortable positions so that you can learn, you don't go anywhere. And that's one thing that I can say, is I'm real comfortable putting myself in those spots.
It's funny, man. You're bringing back something a conversation 7 years ago, when I first came to Nashville, I worked for a company, didn't know anything about them, wanted a new opportunity, breaking up with my girlfriend at the time, getting away from some folks in the wrong crowd. And I just packed up the car, took the job, and drove to Nashville, right? Never been to Nashville. I don't like country music. I didn't even have a Facebook friend here, right? And I remember going into the office, and we were talking about diversifying into running transportation programs and working with more hospitals and doing shuttling and all that. And my boss at the time was, he's like, do we really want to do this? Do we really want to get into this different piece of business? And I know you did it in Boston and you have that experience. And, when you're shuttling nurses, your day starts at 2:30 a.m., you run a shuttle, and you end at 1 a.m., right? So it's almost around the clock. It's 7 days a week. And I was like, yeah, why not, right? Like, let's go. Let's do the thing. And I remember him saying this to me, Mark, and I haven't thought about this since. He looked at me, and he's like, Jim, you're a glutton for punishment. It's like you like the pain. And that just came back to me as you were saying, because I wanted to do something new. I wanted to take the company to a different level. I wanted to endure a new hardship, so to say, to grow, to learn, to build. Right. And I think you're somewhat the same way. And it never hit when he said that, but when you were saying this now, I was like, man, I am a glutton for punishment. Like, I do want to raise the bar. I do want to take a risk. I do want new opportunity.
Yeah, and if you're not growing, and you need both in this world, right? Because not everybody can run companies. Because if they did, then nobody would work for us, because they'd all own other companies, right? So we need that, and that's okay. But for me, it just wasn't my path, like you, right? You know, it was always for me, as soon as I learned something, I needed to know what was next. I was never happy just resting back on everything that I had learned.
Has anybody...
I had to put it to use as I was learning something else.
That makes sense. Makes total sense. Has anybody ever told you to slow down in life?
All the time.
What's your response to that?
I've had them start when I was a carpenter. They would tell me, slow down, you're making us look bad.
You're making us look bad. Mark, can you finish the job a little slower? Because I don't want to work as hard as you.
I said, dude, this is slow. You're just making yourself look bad. I never let off. I always tried to find a way to bring out the best in people as I came. I made everybody better carpenters, better electricians, better this, better that. You know, not so much as a tradesperson, but as an individual and how they face their job. So I would get that all along. In every position I was in, I was getting it. You need to learn to be happy where you are. You need to dial it back a little bit. You need to this, you need to that. And I said, no, that's not in line with my goal, dude.
It's that vision. It's that dream, man.
I'm going someplace, and we're either going to do that together or we're going to part ways. You know, I've had some pretty big companies ask me that question. You know, what are you trying to accomplish working like this? I mean, we appreciate it. You're working really hard. But where are you headed with this? And I said, you're old enough that you're getting ready to retire. I see myself in that spot. And when I get to that spot, there's going to be a time you retire, and I'm going to want to be in your spot. That's just the way I think. And
it's next level, baby.
And if I don't see that path in my future, I'll go somewhere where it is. And I got to a point that, you know, I didn't see it making sense for me taking over someone else's companies. And I'll tell you the biggest challenge I've had in my life, despite everything that I've gone through, is stepping into companies that have the money and the accounting and the deep bench and every processes and procedures and the systems all in place. I can step into them, and I can make them all better in short order. I have a gift for that. I can take failing companies and make them profitable. Starting one from scratch, dude, that's a different beast entirely. You have to do everything until you're making enough money to start paying people to do the parts. And sometimes that's not easy. You know, so you do without a lot until you get to a place, you know.
It's interesting because my mom's in town right now, and we're finishing up several books, helping clients write their book, and you know, getting them published, and helping out with some marketing, and we're growing, and we've got a small team, and we've got some outsourced help and all that. But she's like, you're working a lot. You know, like, is this going to be consistent? She's just starting to ask questions, right? It's my mom, right? She cares about me. You know, she's here visiting. I'm working 17-hour days. I had a speaking engagement this week. We've got an event tonight, right? I went to another event last night, met some people. And it's funny because my wife was sitting right there. And my wife said, Janet, you know that he makes his own schedule? And that to her didn't make sense, right? Like, she's like, you're working all this time.
You're doing it to yourself on purpose.
Yeah. You're doing it to yourself on purpose. And even my wife, you know, she's like, you know, you could take a break today in between some podcasts and in between the setup and in between fixing the run of show and approving the final PowerPoints and, you know, and doing the event. And my question to her was, do you think I'd be happy if I took a break today? And she's like, no, I just want to make sure you're all right. So I see the different sides of it, but what it did for me literally 2 hours ago, I'm built like this. Like, to me, it's what needs to be done, what I want to do, how I want to grow. And, you know, losing my dad 12 years ago, losing 28 friends before I was 30 years old, nothing's guaranteed. Nothing can be consistent. Nothing can occur at the level or the time or in the place that I want it to be. I don't have control over any of that. Right. So if I'm not going to do this and something happens to me or to someone else that's close to me and I didn't get the opportunity, but I had the opportunity and I didn't take it, that doesn't feel good to me.
Right. That regret's heavy.
And I want to be laying on my deathbed and be happy. I don't want to think of regret. I don't want to think about, wow, maybe I should have followed that dream, or if I just took a little bit more risk, and what would happen if I did this, right? And when we work with people who have great stories and they're experts and we're helping them write their book, it's a common theme that comes up. The what if I didn't listen to my dad? What if I didn't run my family company and started the tech company I wanted to? What if? And that term just sits with me heavy, man. And it's scary, right? I'll be vulnerable. It's all not roses, you know?
No, it's not.
And sometimes you don't know the next step. Sometimes you don't know where the path's leading to you. Sometimes you had no idea that this thing was going to happen and someone was going to sue someone and you owned a piece of that business and you didn't get your $200,000 check and Christmas is tomorrow.
Right.
Right? Like, but what if? What if I didn't navigate that? What if I didn't learn the skills through that process? What if I didn't understand how to take a contract and make it a little bit more tighter so it never happens again? What if there was every dollar I owned on the line at that time?
Right.
And I just don't want to live a life like that. I'm sure you're very similar.
I am. You know, I look at what if differently. An idea comes up, so what if we do that now?
Flip the script on their perception and how it comes into your brain, mind, and heart and soul.
Yeah, somebody will bring an idea to the table and say, do you think that maybe we could ever do this? So what if we do that now? I don't like to wait. I don't like to wait for anything. We hire contractors to do stuff. If they're not answering the phone, I'll send somebody else to do their job. Next time, they'll answer the phone and they'll go do the job.
Do you think a lot of that comes down to integrity?
Yeah, and it's, you know, I have a pretty insane level expectation of myself, you know, and I just expect people to measure up to that. And, you know, sometimes it's unfair to people because they didn't come through everything that I came through to have the skills and the tools and resources within myself. They don't have that to be that level. But I've always been pretty good at just getting the best out of people, you know, so.
How do you think you pull the best out of people?
Well, in general, you know, you can really see the negative in everything if you allow yourself. I see it only long enough to figure out how to fix it or how to get around it, right? It's never to stew in it. So I deal with that stuff immediately and put it behind me. And I focus solely on good everything. Positive energy, good this, good that. That looked great, you know, and everybody's, yeah, but that didn't turn out good. So what? That was 1/100th of a job. The 99% turned out fine. Why are you worried about the one thing? You're going to drag down the rest of the deal because of one thing? That's just not the way I think. You know, everything, you know, I find humor in everything. You know, I tend to be pretty serious when I'm talking to people and dealing with stuff. But when I get comfortable with folks, look out. Because I will come at you with some of the craziest, funny, sideways stuff because it makes you remember things when I do it that way. And it takes the tension out of it. So when you're dealing with somebody and there's something for them to learn, you can sort of be stern, go straight at it. It'll feel like a lecture or it'll feel like you're coming down on them. Or you can turn it into something positive. Dude, you know, a year ago you were doing this. Look how far you've come. I need you to tweak this thing. And look, this is where you'll end up, right? And that doesn't sound like you screwed up. That sounds like you've grown a lot. You got more room to grow, but you've grown a lot. So how you give that to people, I think is important. And I think that I'm overly sensitive to that because I'm kinesthetic. You know, when people say stuff to me, it sticks because I don't just hear it. I feel it, right? So I'm probably more sensitive to that than most because of that.
It's interesting because what do you get out of a situation where you put someone down, make them feel stupid, inferior, that they don't belong? Like if you really are trying to accomplish a goal, if you're really trying to get to the finish line, when I take a step back and I look at those scenarios and conversations, and yeah, I've messed it up, right? I've had to learn through the process.
Of course.
But when I'm working with someone, when someone's on my team, and I take the step back and I look at it, and I'm like, it may be internally my own shit of why I want to just lash out or why I want to be super direct. But if I can be direct in a loving way, in a way that repositions and still gets us to the end goal and lets them know, like, yeah, there's still room to grow, right? But why do I have to berate you? Why do I have to talk down to you? Why do I have to treat you in a manner that, one, I wouldn't want to treat myself, treat my mom, treat my wife, treat my kids? And if we're working all these hours together, if we're both trying to get to the same vision, the same goal, finish the contract, enhance things, get to that finish line, and I know I need you, that's why I hired you, that's why I'm working with you, then why do I want to beat you up in a way where you feel stupid or inferior? Why wouldn't I want to take that step back, love on you a little bit, and position it to encourage you, to inspire you? One of the things I say often is like, encouragement's free. Inspiration's free. It doesn't cost me a dime to reanalyze a scenario that may pull some emotion, may get me frustrated, right? May get me a little edgy. But I think the biggest thing I had to learn over time is to control that and then redistribute it out in a positive way.
Right. And here, I'll share that in my corporate life, specifically when I left the field and got into the office jobs, right? Emotion, there was no place for it in commercial mixed-use corporate life. There just wasn't. That to everybody around you, that was a sign of weakness. And if you were to lose your cool in the office, you'll lose your cool in front of a client, and they would that was it, right? That was sort of the end for you. So I learned very early to learn how to control those emotions. It took time to figure out how to express those feelings in a way that were positive. Because you start to bottle that up, man, it'll eat you up for a while, right? So it just, for me, it just never made sense to beat people up. You can get the same thing done, like you were saying, have somebody feel better about themselves, and they're going to be more willing to learn from you if you treat them that way, right? So I would much rather build than destroy.
Take the opportunity to deepen the relationship, get on the same level, give some new insights, some new ways to look at it, some new skills where everybody moves forward, everybody advances.
Right. And there's times, like you, I don't get it right all the time. I'm pretty level-headed, but I run 8 companies, half of them national brands. And I didn't expect any of that to happen in retirement. And, we're running jobs that have a lot of zeros on the end of them. Raising that kind of capital puts some stress on you. So there are times I don't act right. It's not out of malicious intent, but sometimes I'll react in a way that's not as subtle as I tend to try to be. And after the fact, it'll eat me up. And I'll go find a person. Look, hey, I'm sorry. You needed to hear what you needed to hear. You should need to hear it that way. And, I'll do a better job of that in the future. Because that'll eat me up.
Yeah.
I can't just leave it when I do that. I got to go fix it.
It's responsibility for your actions or your words. It's falling on the sword because you knew you were wrong or you made a mistake. And I think that actually will deepen a relationship.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that actually is a prominent point to build deep human connection with someone, is to be vulnerable enough to defeat the ego that you were wrong. You did make a mistake. And science and statistics show that when you are vulnerable, when you do admit that you don't know everything, you're not perfect, that you are human just like someone else, it actually brings people closer rather than push them away, because they don't feel like they're on this scale of you're way up here and you're down here, but it also doesn't bring it down to this.
Right.
It just brings it closer to feel more human with each other, to be able to build that relationship. And I wish more people had the perspective you had and are honest about it, because I think, I'm around a lot of high performers. I'm in a lot of green rooms speaking on stages, and you tend to get in these rooms and it's like, man, like, I know everything's not perfect. I know you're not perfect, but I don't know if I can connect as deep with you to not just have a real convo, right? Like being authentic with each other and saying I make mistakes or saying I'm not perfect or I messed this up. Like that's the juicy stuff that actually allows me to appreciate you more and realize that you are a human. You're not this, robot. You're not this, machine. And do I really want to spend a lot of time with someone who I think is, the next technologically advanced AI agent robot? Like, for me, no, And I know there's some listeners out there who might be like, yeah, man, let's go. I'm all about AI and robots. And I use it too, and I, endure. But, like, I just don't think that's the way to build the relationship, to align with someone that has similar core values, to understand their core values, to understand if you're misaligned or aligned. A lot of people, because I talk about human connection a lot and deepening relationships and leveraging and all that. And a lot of people come up to me and be like, well, why, does that mean you have to like everybody? Does that mean you have to connect with everybody? And my response is always the same. If I can ask you deep questions that get down to your core values, your experiences, what you like, what you don't like, scenarios, situations that you've been in, how you've handled them, what your dreams are. If I can get deep early on, then it allows me to make a decision if we're aligned or not. So think of it like this. You go to an event and you talk to 5 people and you do the, hey, what's the weather? How are you? And I call them cotton candy conversations, right? They look good. They might taste sweet, but they're terrible for you, right? It's all sugar. It's all trash. But if you ask the deep questions, then I can go, okay, this event's an hour. I came here to meet 2 or 3 people. I've talked to 5. I've asked them what their dreams are. The first thing that came out of their mouth was they want to make $1 billion and they don't care how they get it or what they have to sell or what they need to do. Well, now I know that I don't want to spend 10 more minutes asking you about the weather, right? I'm going to say, I need to use the restroom.
Right. There's people.
And I'm going to go talk to this guy or gal sitting right next to you because we're not aligned. Why would I want to spend another 10 minutes trying to figure it out when I know in my heart, and I'm not everybody, I'm my own person, that if your response is I want to make $1 billion, I'm going to do it however I can and sell whatever I can, we're probably not going to do business together, right? And if I came there to do business with someone, or if I came there, heck, to find a new friend. This event tonight, 7 Minutes of Impact, I sent out an email. I'm like, the goal tonight is no business cards and to show up with the mindset that you want to come and find 2 new friends. Because if you can talk to someone like a friend, you can get real, you can get honest, you can get vulnerable. And guess what we like to do?
Business together.
Business with people we would be friends with.
Right.
What do you think about that, Mark?
I love that. Because I feel the same way. We can go to these events and meet 50 people. And then you'll meet that one that the rest of the room just disappears when you get into those conversations. They're the people you lean into. They're the ones you give the time. Because that stuff leads to something meaningful and real. Right? I had that happen at an EXP event last fall. I went, we did the networking party after the fact. We're meeting a bunch of people. I got introduced to a guy, not some guy. I know we know each other pretty well by now. And we hit it off pretty well. And it's not just we could communicate well. His likes were my likes. He liked doing the things I like to do. He was into music. I was in a band that was signed for a while. And, all the things that turn us on, we both were into the same stuff. It wasn't just, we talk on the same frequency kind of stuff, right? It was real. And we talked about the things that he was passionate about, the things that I'm passionate about. There was some alignment there with regard to the veterans and some other stuff. And I left the event feeling like I'd made a friend, right? A month later, he calls me and said, dude, I got a piece of property you're probably going to be interested in. Let me put you on a plane. Can you come to Colorado? Flew to Colorado. I said, dude, I'll just come to see you. I don't care if the deal works or not.
Makes the trip a little bit funner, a little bit easier when you're doing fun shit with cool people.
So I went, we looked at the property, and it had some pretty interesting aspects to it. And doing what I do, I see things where people don't see things. That's just, I've had a knack for it. And part of it just comes from all the experience that I've had. I've seen so much stuff. I can look at things and see things differently than most. And it turned out to be the largest undeveloped tract of commercial real estate within 100 miles of itself. Put it under contract. We're putting in 350 to 400 condos, 100 to 125,000 square foot of mixed use retail. And I'm picking the piece of property up next to it and putting it together with this weird shape on the end of the property. And I'm going to stick in a 150 room garden style hotel there too. All from one conversation where you walked into a room and recognized the people that were not going to head anywhere and paying attention to the one that did.
And you guys bonded over music and similarities and stuff that has nothing to do
We didn't even talk
with real estate.
We didn't even talk shop while we were there, while we were at the event. It was just, I'm interested in you, you're interested in me, and as it turns out, we like a lot of the same stuff.
That's it, man. That's the connection. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what makes life fun, when you do fun shit with cool people. Yeah. And I think we forget that. We're wrapped up in the dollars. We're wrapped up in the budget. We're wrapped up in the, I need to hit this goal or this mark, or Q1 numbers need to look like this. And we forget that it's always going to be a human-to-human interaction. Business gets done from one human to another, right? Especially big business. Like, did you talk to an AI agent to invest $200 million? No. Do you think you ever will? No. Now, they may underwrite the deal. There might be an app. There might be a tech stack. There might be a PowerPoint, right? But like, are you just going to not engage with a human and give them that much money, or, not validate some of the facts, some of the scenarios, some of the pro formas that come on your table?
Yeah, because people can come to the table and be very good at a package, but they suck as an individual. They suck as an operator. They suck as the integrator. They're just not the people you want running your investment. So if you don't spend the time with them figuring out who they are, what have they come through? How did they handle it when they went through it? All that stuff's important when you're investing in people. And that's why, you can pull me up on the internet under my full name, Mark Vincent Fansler. I own like the first 20 pages of Google, and none of it's paid for. It's all organic. None of it's paid SEO, none of it. It's all organic. And, so you can find out an awful lot about a person these days just by doing that one thing. And, the thing I'm most proud of, as long as I've been in business, as long as the internet's been around, there's nothing negative about us. Not about any of my companies, not about me. Never been sued. Don't have bad reviews, none of it. That's a hard thing to do in this day and age.
Totally.
So, you can find a lot about people, but when it's all said and done, that just puts them in a room with you. You still got to close the deal, and that comes to these relationships.
Mark Vincent Fansler. Man, what a great episode, brother. I really appreciate you. Thanks for being on the Impact Effect podcast.
Yeah, likewise. I really enjoyed being here and appreciate you having me in.